right. Hello and welcome to ShawChicago's Talk, Her Words, Her Voice. We're talking about what women in Chicago theater experience and how we as a community can move forward. So, if everyone could go around, just say your name and which organization you're from.
Julie Proudfoot. I'm the founding artistic director of Artemisia Chicago Theatre, and I'm thrilled to be doing this with ShawChicago.
I'm Allison Cook, and I'm here with ShawChicago. I'm in the production of Heartbreak House right now.
I'm Jamil Khoury, founding artistic director of Silk Road Rising, and also really honored to be sitting at this table.
I'm Carrie Lee Patterson. I'm with Artemisia Theatre, directing their upcoming world premiere of Visiting.
My name is Hope Kim. I'm with A Square Theatre, and I'm one of the actors and producers for the theater company.
Hi, I'm Barbara Zahora. I'm the Associate Artistic Director with Shakespeare Project of Chicago, and I'm also in ShawChicago's current production of Heartbreak House.
Hi, I'm Deanna Dye. I'm with For Youth Inquiry Chicago. Also really glad to be here.
I'm Delia Kropp. I'm an actress and director, and I'm with the Chicago Inclusion Project, and I'm a company member of Pride Films and Plays.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. We'll start with a super simple question. What are 3 things you like about working in Chicago theater? This is an open question. Anyone can jump in.
Well, a lot of one of the 3 things I love about Chicago theater are the people sitting at the stage. But I think one of the things that, for me, I came to Chicago after starting a career in other cities, so I wasn't trained here, and I did a lot of work in New York and LA before I hit Chicago. So, unlike other markets that I've walked into, at one of my very first auditions, I met Barbara Zahora at an open call at Actors Equity, and shortly thereafter I met Carrie Lee Patterson and Jamil Khoury, and it was just such a warm and welcoming city, and the community was so supportive. I was thrilled. So that's one of the things I love.
I love that Chicago allows theater makers to take risks. I think that there's an energy in this community that allows for experimentation, which is why it's such a great town for new work. And you can, fall down and pick yourself up and dust yourself off and try again. So I think it's a very forgiving and embracing city.
I feel like there's different sizes of art all over the place. You can do something fairly large and visible, or something in, tiny 50-seat space, and you just feel like you're getting to stretch as an artist in a lot of different ways.
And I would piggyback on that I appreciate all the opportunity and sort of the range of opportunity. In many ways, the size of art, but also I feel like whether you're, in a 500-seat theater or 50-seat theater, that you're still treated with dignity as a project, that it's not like looked down on because it's a smaller kind of project or something like that. That there's dignity and respect for all of those sizes, which is cool.
All right. I guess from there, let's ask the next question. Okay, since you all have been in the theater scene for a while, what obstacles do you guys, had to check myself there. What obstacles do you all face in the theater scene?
Okay, I'll start. I guess being a transgender person, the obstacle I face is that really nobody knows what to do with me. But everybody's trying. I want to answer actually the first question. I think the thing that's wonderful about the Chicago theater community is that it is a community. For the size that we are, with the number of working theaters that we have and the number of people that consider it their career, we do have an identity of ourselves, I think, in a way that rivals any other city, certainly in this country at least. Our efforts at inclusion, our efforts at equality, parity, our efforts such as Not in Our House to make this a safer place, are based on the assumption that we are a community and that we work together, whether we're understudying at the tiniest black box or we're playing a lead at the Goodman or Steppenwolf or someplace. And I find that the community really is trying really hard to find out what to do with us. I have something we can maybe talk about later, an initiative going on right now, sponsored at this point by both the Goodman and Steppenwolf. Over 100 artistic directors, casting directors, and so on showed up on November 29th, simply to discuss how to use transgender theater artists in a productive and fair way, and what kind of stories are we telling about the transgender community through our artistic community. And I don't think that would ever have happened in any other city, certainly of this size. You know, we saw an issue and we got together and we're going to start to work on it. It's in progress, of course, like many important things are, but I'm just really thrilled. So yes, I have challenges, but we're working on it, and I feel very positive about that.
Do you feel like were any solutions? I just want to ask that I was not there. Were any solutions like made, or did any conclusions drawn from that meeting? Or
The first meeting was a 90-minute panel, and mostly it was simply going through productions that we had already had in the last year and a half, and what some of the thinking was behind the choices that were made. Some of the most successful ones had not one transgender performer on that stage, but they did other things in a very positive and encouraging way. And then just to see, so basically to find out where we are right now. The subsequent meetings will be addressing very specific questions in a very nuts and bolts way. You know, what can we do to help ourselves, our artists, and productions that are coming down the road to move forward in a really productive and equitable manner. So we'll have at least 2 or 3 meetings, I imagine, between now and the summer.
Awesome. All right, anyone else want to talk about any struggles, trials in the theater scene?
I can go. Well, I think we all have our own issues. Like, so for me as a minority actor, being an Asian American, I think it's always been challenging. And how A Squared Theater was founded was actually by a bunch of Asian American actors who decided that they weren't getting represented enough and in the Chicago theater scene. So I'm not one of the founding members, but I've been volunteering very early on since like 08-ish. So I've been with the theater for almost like 9 years now. And we try to represent Asian American stories, Asian American writers, actors, directors, artists, if possible. And it's actually funny how currently our co-production of American Pong Up that we're co-producing with Halcyon Theater, all the actors are Asian, but if you look at like behind the scenes, so all of our production team is actually not Asian. So it's kind of, we still have yet to, I think, find, and I don't know if there are other Asian American, costume designers, sound designers, set designers, set builders, whatnot. I'm not sure, but it's, trying to be that representation in Chicago theater has been a challenge, A. B, also trying to get Asian American communities to recognize or appreciate theater, I guess, in general, and that's also been very challenging. We don't have a problem reaching out to the theater goers. However, we want to reach out to the Asian American theater communities about us, existing, trying to tell our stories here.
Well, I wanted to piggyback off what you were saying about the leader. I don't want to use the word leadership because actors, of course, are leading on stage, but production teams, it's so fascinating. When we did Belfast Girls in 2015, I wondered, we were an all-female, totally female production team. There was not a single man on the team, period. And from director, writer down, everyone on that production team was a woman, including the actors, everybody. And it was such a fascinating idea to go, this is very unusual for an all-female team to put on a piece of theater is very unusual. And actually had audience members come because Belfast Girls is 5 women, right, on stage. And so I actually had audience members walk up to me. And they weren't always older white gentlemen. They were sometimes, you know, other people, younger people, other races. They were women, and would say, I've never seen a play with 5 women in it before, and no men. And I
Really?
yes, yes. And so I think that from our point of view, when we're inside of it, making the art, you know, especially at Artemisia, because we're very used to a lot of women on the team and a lot of women in leadership on the team. But if you look at a cross section of the whole city, you know, even what we're doing, and we're doing great things in Chicago around gender parity, we still have so far to go. Especially what you were saying in terms of producer, writer, director, designers, those roles that are, you know, typically male.
Oh, sorry. I guess this is a combo challenge, and I'll start as a director perspective, because I started as an actor, and so, you know, we could just go on the typical aging woman thing, very few roles thing, you know, which is a known challenge. But I think right now, for a Shakespeare project, what's great about what we do with classic text and that particular playwright is it is very inclusive. However, my artistic director is a white man, and I'm obviously a white woman, and our core membership of that group is a bunch of white people. And over the last few years, I'm so excited you're here, because I wanted to talk to the Inclusion Project and a lot of, you know, other people to try to break a pattern that we've got going on, which is people don't want to come to our auditions because they assume we won't cast them, even when we have put out, you know, we're open to people of all colors and genders and everything. And I think it's a chicken and egg thing. You know, if you come to our readings and you haven't seen yourself on stage, why on earth would you think that that's going to change? And however, you know, if you don't come in the room and we don't know how to find you, then that perpetuates. So that we're having that problem, and we'd really like to stop having that problem. But yeah, I think a lot more discussion is needed on that.
Does that problem kind of ring across the board for everybody? Does everyone resonate with that issue, or lack of inclusion just in general?
I would love to see some more like sort of cross-gender casting, and I know that is starting to happen. You know, Barb did the production of Taming of the Shrew with Artemisia last season, and I know that that's starting to happen, but you know, my problem is I'm a tall gal, and I have always been tall, and so, you know, and actually
How dare you?
But, you know, actually as a singer, I've had a bunch of opportunities to do sort of what are considered like pants roles, because actually in the opera world, there's actually a lot written for men to play dudes, and I'd love to see more of that, particularly when you're looking at some of the classic plays, like, you know, just in terms of numbers, right, where we've got plays where it's, you know, 7 men, 3 women. And let's look at what our casting pool is. We've got a whole ton more women, and frankly, a whole ton more in terms of, like, balance, you know, and also coming out of theater conservatories, still a lot more women than guys. So just in terms of, like, demographics in the pipeline, we've just got a lot more female actors than we do male actors. And
that's being done a lot in London, throughout Britain, actually. It's controversial, but yeah, the gender reversal or simply genderless casting, especially in Shakespeare or other classical.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you, but our fall festival coming up in 2017, and it's very exciting what we've picked, and some of the plays are literally genderless casting. I mean, in the sense that doesn't just have to be a classical play for that to happen. And there are voices out there now in terms of writers. I can think of Eileen Campbell's Jared. It's a fabulous piece. And it so crosses the line of it's so gender fluid in its messaging, in its storyline, in its dysfunctional family examination. It's very original. And we have 5 other plays like that too. They're all written by women, but even though they're a modern story, the way gender is examined is very, very fluid, much like the way we associate race now, and at least I do, and theater is very fluid. I've never quite understood why we're not more fluid in terms of race and casting, because for me it's a very fluid issue, you know. And I think now we really have an opportunity in new voices coming out in new plays where there's more gender fluidity as well.
A chair of a theater program was recently telling us that when he'll go to these national or these regional auditions for either BFA or MFA programs, the ratio of women to men is 5 to 1, which is, you know, and he said if a woman walks in the room and doesn't just like nail it in 10 seconds, he's already, and he was like, I hate admitting this, but because there's just so many women vying for so few slots.
Right.
And, you know, when I mentioned this idea of genderless casting or cross-gender, however you want to, there was a lot of resistance. There was and I don't mean resistance in like a hostile way, but resistance in I don't know how I could sell that kind of way. I don't know how I could explain or contextualize. I also want to say something building upon what Hope was saying, because obviously we do Asian American, Middle Eastern American, playwright protagonist is sort of the alignment. It's about building trust. You know, audiences or people who are not traditionally theater goers becoming theater goers, but being very wary of how am I going to be represented, because I'm accustomed to being represented in a way that I don't recognize or in a way that is somehow alienating or insulting. And also with mainstream audiences, give me my stereotypes, give me my parodies, you know, and I don't even necessarily mean that that's being expressed verbatim, but just about. You know, that kind of thing that affirm my worst fears, affirm, you know, my lowest common denominator, and, you know, so we are forever pushing back on just that. So it's a tricky...
Yeah, bring up a good point. It isn't just a matter of what opportunities are there casting-wise, it's what kind of stories are we telling about women, about trans people,
And
about
in some
different...
ways, that's where it begins, doesn't it? Because if the stories aren't representing everybody, then there's no way for the rest of it to happen. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, just to address what you were saying before about people of color maybe not coming to Shakespeare auditions. Do they really see anything that addresses, you know, their experience and maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know, but it's more than just I haven't seen myself up there.
No, I'm a teacher too. I teach at Roosevelt University, and we talk about that a lot. You know, that are these age-old classic stories relatable? And we always build them as universal, and many times they are. Sometimes they're just not. We need some new stories.
Yeah, and I feel like it's important to be to sometimes be really intentional about who you're reaching out to, right? And what you can do. I feel like a lot of times it is cool when there is room for fluidity and what gender of person are we gonna cast here? What race are we gonna cast? We're not gonna specify, you know. But then sometimes, or a lot of the time, what seems to happen is you get a white cast. When especially when it comes to race, when race isn't specified, that's just what happens, and that's what a lot of actors of color kind of have come to expect. So we show up to auditions being really hesitant to even go for parts like that, you know. So there is something sometimes about being intentional about saying, I would love to have a person of color in this role, or I would love to have an African American person in this part, you know. Sometimes being specific actually helps.
Well, and what you're saying is so true as a producer during Shrewish with Barbara, and I specifically said, I want to cast 4 women of color in this. If I need to find 4 women of color, and I want to cast them in this play,
And,
in this
and
production.
they came.
And they came, and we found them, and Daniel, the lovely Daniel Davis sat at a panel and said, you know, when I was in school, I was told, don't even bother. I know you love the classics, but don't bother because you will not get those opportunities. You are an African American woman, and you're an African. What did she say? She did. Well, you're larger, you know, Daniel. So she's so funny. She has that great sense of humor. So she was talking about
she's an atypical look,
atypical body type,
an atypical body type,
and she said, so all the guys told me I couldn't do this. So to be able to do this was so amazing for me. And she was wonderful. She was all of the actors were delicious in it, but we were very dedicated about it. And I think, as a producer, when I'm looking at the Fall Festival and I'm looking at 6 plays and I'm looking at different writers and I'm thinking, where's the voice of color? Where's the anti-Western voice? Where's the voice that's coming from the East, the Middle East? Where's the voice that's coming somewhere than white America?
Dion, I actually want to bring friends into conversation because a lot of your work with FYI deals with like sexual education for youth and youth empowerment. So, are you finding solutions through your work right now?
I really am. So it's an awesome group. A little more about them. Like part of what we do is touring shows to like high school and middle school students about like sexual health and things like that, relationships, how to discuss in your relationship different issues, the importance of consent, things like that. And so it is, especially because like we're creating a public season this year, and so we're working on some shows. The one I've like co-written and I'm also acting in is about virginity. So one of the things we did when we were doing the research on like to write it, we had different like devising sessions with, first we opened up to like some Chicago actors to come and devise with us around their experiences about virginity and like how it relates to like race and how it can relate to like sexual violence and like things like that, those messages. But we also opened it up to like young people. We went to Broadway Youth Center and stuff, and we had like I think with the Chat Network we discussed things with them. So like we were like we want to do a play about young people for young people and make sure we include the voices of like young people of color. So I feel like it was so important to reach out to some of these different networks, go to them and actually like get their experiences like for our work. I feel like that it's so important to like make sure that you're doing that. Like if you want to make this play for this group of people, like going in and like asking them like how they feel. So, but yeah, it's been a great process so far. And like for this show, we have like a female producer, like a female director. We have like a really like female heavy cast, and like a lot of them are like women of color. And it's just like been a really great like healing and wonderful process. So.
All right. So
that's great to hear, and I think most of us are part of organizations that are attempting to do something about the lack of parity in various areas, right? So we don't have that other voice on the panel. But I think one of the big challenges is getting the industry as a whole to admit they have a bias, because you can't change anything until you admit you have a bias.
Well, we reflect the society at large, don't we?
Right.
Yes.
Which is white majority that is so blind in many cases to their own privilege, because it's just something we live in and swim with. Until I transitioned, I had no idea how privileged I was as a white male. And it just opened my eyes, and I'm still much to learn. But that's a challenge. Is how do you explain something? How do you explain the air to somebody?
I think with theater people, we like to think of ourselves as the good liberals, and and we do a lot of anti-Islamophobia work, and that is an important thread in the Silk Road pantheon. And the amount of liberal Islamophobia that I am like interfacing with all the time is mind-blowing. By that I mean, oh, well, Islam is anti-woman, Islam is anti-gay, Islam is... okay, so you've just thrown Muslim feminists under the bus, you've just thrown Muslim queers under the bus, you've just thrown, you've just betrayed Muslim progressives who are who are fighting for change within a tradition, within a community, and those are our allies, and those are the communities we belong to, and the communities that we ally ourselves with. But it is incredible how people just dismiss, you know, out of hand. Well, that's, you know, and from this very sort of smug, self-righteous place, you know, because of the illiberalism of Islam, let's say, or Muslimness. I don't have to engage, or I can take this sort of, you know, oppositional stance, and it, you know, I always have to, like, okay, deep breath, and let's look at who you're talking about, and to.
Well, and I think we've all sort of said this in some way or another, but that's the way it is the language we have to lose. You know, that attitude has to be lost. Well, you know, talking about, well, I don't know how I do gender fluid. I've got 100, you know, really talented women of various colors, and I've got 6 guys, but I'm going to ignore that resource. And I'm going to keep going in my good old stodgy way of doing, because that's just the way it is. No, we're the way it is. We every day make choices to make it the way it is. So anybody who says, no, well, that's just the way it is a complete cop-out. Because they are making an active choice, he or she is making an active choice to ignore the world as it is right now.
I feel like I've run into that a lot too. I was understudying a show and my friend saw it. He's like a white guy, and the show was like about race and like about like black male imprisonment and stuff. And he was like, I love this show. Like I feel though like the community, like the theater community, seeing this as like more like preaching to the choir. Like, you know, like, I feel like me seeing this is, like, preaching to the choir, and I was like, well, there's a lot of, like, people in the Chicago theater community who could stand to, like, learn from this. They could learn a lot. Like, we're not the choir. Like, there are so many problems within the community that we've already talked about.
Right.
So, yeah, just, like, knowing, like, there's so much more you can learn, and, like, so much more you need to learn, you know. But, yeah, it's a good question of how do we call that out? Like,
And Julia brought this up earlier, and I'd love to go back for it a little bit, because you talked about whose stories are we telling. And that overlaps with, but is not the same thing as, who's working in the theater, is whose voices are we hearing in these stories. And in many ways, that is where it begins. So if you have a bias, and we've proven study after study that there are biases when we see names on scripts. That if that is
like character names?
No,
just the name.
Playwright names. Who's submitting the plays, right? So if it's a woman's name on there, if it's an African woman's name on there, even right, you're already biased against it, especially men, but not just men.
No.
And we have assumptions that a script written by a woman is going to be somehow a softer story.
Right.
Right? And so...
I'm sorry, I love that. No, I do.
And especially with your namesake, Artemisia.
Right.
Gentilicious.
Right. Yeah, no, that's very,
What's
very
this
true.
blood and violence doing in here?
Yeah.
So in the very little experience that I have with selecting scripts, which is for a particular reading series that I got a grant in order to be able to do, but the first thing I did was I gathered my group of script readers, making sure it was many different voices represented in that group, right? And then I didn't let anybody see a title page or a playwright name. And it completely changed the representation of the finalist scripts from other script reader groups I've been part of before, where we did get to see that. And that's wonderful, and that is, I think, something we can do, an actual thing we can do. But we can't do it with directors, and we can't do it with actors. You can't be, you can't be a nothing when you walk in the room.
Yeah.
People see,
Then they be the white under the white sheet.
You could do auditions like The Voice, where people
Right.
Right.
but they have to be without a voice. They have to be without a voice.
What you said,
We're like the
inclusion has
violin.
to be a choice.
Yeah, it has to be like on your mind, right? Because otherwise, like, as we've seen time and time again, like Raceline Casting, like, you know, always so often ends up with like a fully white cast. So it has to, I think it has to be at the forefront that like these people have been left out. I'm going to intentionally like make sure I include them.
Can I just say though to you guys, like, I also sort of like, yes, I agree, but then at the same time, you know, from like the director or the producer's perspective, if you, like, let's say you open it up, right? And then you say open cast, open whatever, come in and audition. But wouldn't you, and then don't look at the color of the actors that comes in, but wouldn't you just want the best actor to be, like, to cast for that certain
Absolutely,
role?
and I think it's,
So isn't
but I
that sort
think
of
it's
like a fine balance that you have to find?
But I think we have, I agree that we have to be intentional, because I think the most, I am so liberal in my, truly liberal in my love of story. I just take my hat off, you know, prove me wrong. I love it, I love it, I love it, I live for that. And I have dedicated biases that I look at every day as an artistic director and say, if you do not intentionally go after this, so if you think about, well, that's the best actor, all of us have biases about what that means, you know, when we have a snapshot in our head.
Especially in Shakespeare.
Right.
Well, I'm directing Macbeth for Oak Park Festival Theatre coming up,
Right.
and I did cast a trans person in one of the roles that is not, I mean, it was interesting because I was trying to be intentional about certain, I mean, in who I called back, I was trying to be intentional. At the same time, and I have to throw this out too, because it's a huge part of the thing that keeps feeding the problem, when people don't have as many opportunities as the white actors, then in terms of skill and, you know, sometimes they're not competing.
And experience and resume
And
credit
experience and resume and everything
And
else.
that's
So
very different in Europe, isn't it?
it is.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
It's an
I mean,
American
it was,
thing.
You know,
It drives me crazy.
When I did a residency at Shakespeare School, it was totally different.
Yeah.
You know, that way. So it's like, I mean, the person I ended up casting, I actually did make the intentional choice, thinking it's okay that they don't have as much experience. I'll direct them up instead of the person that, frankly, beat them out in a read. But
if things are
most of
going to change, that
Yeah.
really has to be an element. It does, whether we're looking at ethnicity or race or physical ability, disability, or gender identity. You know, we can't just say, well, we're going to take all these people with less experience, we're going to send them to college for 4 years, you know. I mean, that isn't going to do it. That's not practical. We've got to make a choice at a certain point that we are, that inclusion does at least factor into the casting. And I know for some theaters that consider themselves world class, they want to get the so-called world-class actor in terms of experience, in terms of being able to do the accent, or whatever it is, you know, if they're doing Shakespeare especially, perhaps. And it's going to be a sell. It's going to be, so that's one thing I'm working on right now with the trans panel. I'm the only person in the transgender acting community that's over 30, I think. Way over 30. And they've had relatively less experience, partly because of their age, partly just because of the lack of opportunities, you know, that they have seen for themselves. Okay, how do you get the trans people into the picture? How do you get people of color that may just have not seen any opportunities for themselves in Shakespeare or other, you know, dead white male kinds of plays? You know, I mean, something's going to have to evolve.
So what choices?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to, and why are performance credits the measurement of experience? You know, I mean, I think there are so many other ways that we can look at, you know, the life experiences and so that someone is bringing to the table. So I'm generally really disinterested in reading the back of headshots. You know, like this sort of cursory glance where it's, you know, because I think there's a lot more that isn't accounted for.
And the only time it becomes a problem or a thing is when you're tight on time. I think, you know, like in terms of a lot of projects, that's the only reason why sometimes that becomes a factor.
At the same time, right, we're also looking at audition listings where it's like, I want a 30-second monologue and an 8-bar song. No, you don't actually want your 8 bars. You just want me to come in and say, hi, my name's Allison Cook. Here's my high A. Aw, here's my monologue, and say 2 sentences, and then, and so I get sort of frustrated when I see those listings of like, we've allotted this person a minute and a half, 90 seconds total time in the room. Then that's part of how we end up in those decision places.
I agree, and I think our unions, and I'm a really proud union member, but I think our unions are very stodgy around auditions and around this resume thing and around how we interview actors. I mean, I got in a lot of trouble with equity my first 2 auditions because I wanted to change it up and I didn't want people to have to come in and do a 2-minute monologue for the fall festival. I wanted people to be able to read sides. I wanted people to be able to do creative work. I wanted people, and I got into a lot of trouble. It was the actors that were complaining. And I was trying to shake the tree. So.
And unfortunately, we are out of time.
What?
I know. Just getting started. We're going to do a sequel for sure.
30 minutes, it was too short.
This is part 1. I know. We are unfortunately out of time, but yes. Inclusion is a choice. We will continue to include everyone in the space, do what we need to do to include women, people of color, etc. So, last thing, if everyone could go around the room, say once again your name, your company, and if you have an upcoming production, let us know. And we will include that on the Facebook page. Whoa! So,
should I start?
Yes.
Yes, Julie Proudfoot, Artemisia, Chicago Theatre, and we are going into rehearsal next week for the world premiere of Visiting, which is directed by Carrie Lee Patterson and written by Ed Proudfoot, and was picked by our 2015 Fall Festival audience. So come, see it.
I'm doing Heartbreak House right now with ShawChicago. We run through March 27th, and I'm doing Ellie Dunn and having a great time with Barb as Society.
I'm Jamil Corey, Silk Road Rising. We do have an upcoming production, but even before that, I want to plug a conversation we're hosting this weekend on both Saturday and Sunday called The Art of Translating, which is looking at the challenges, the risks, the rewards, and some of the controversial questions around translating across languages and cultures.
Carrie Lee Patterson and my next project, Julie just described, directing Visiting for Artemisia Theatre.
Hope Kim with A Square Theater. We're currently in production of American Hwangap with Halcyon Theater. We run till April 1st.
I'm Barbara Zahora, Associate Artistic Director with Shakespeare Project of Chicago. I'm directing Love's Labor's Lost for them at the end of April, and we run that first week of May at various libraries across the Chicagoland area.
I'm Deanna Dye with For Youth Inquiry, and next week on the 16th we open our new show about virginity called First, and we run until the 26th. It's a little 2-weekend run.
Delia Kropp with Pride Films and Plays, and my next project for Pride Films and Plays will be curating the very first Great Trans and Musical Play Contest. All the submissions will be from transgender playwrights, and as many as need be, many transgender actors, directors, designers, production people will be putting on the show. The winner will receive a week's rehearsal workshop with me, and then I will be doing a staged reading of that winner on June 10th and 11th. Mark your calendars.
And that's it. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.